Deep in the jungles of Guyana, far from the reach of civilization, there exists a place lost to time, hidden beneath a canopy of suffocating green. A place that once thrived with life, with laughter, with hope. But now it is silent, a graveyard of souls, a monument to madness and despair. This is Jonestown, where the jungle whispers and shadows stretch long into the night. No one knew exactly what drove Jim Jones to move his congregation into the dense, humid heart of the Guyanese jungle. For years he had preached to them of salvation, of equality, of a utopian dream where everyone could live in peace, far from the sins of the outside world. He was charismatic, powerful, his voice smooth like honey, his words sharp like a blade. His followers trusted him, loved him, needed him. So when he told them that the only way to achieve true freedom was to leave everything behind, to build a new world from the ground up, they obeyed. They packed their lives into suitcases and boarded planes, leaving behind their families, their friends, their pasts. They arrived in Guyana with hope in their hearts, ready to be reborn. Jonestown, they called it. A new Eden, carved out of the wilderness. At first it seemed like paradise, a community bound by faith, by love, by a shared dream. They worked hard, built homes, planted crops. The jungle was their friend, their protector, wrapping them in its emerald arms, shielding them from the prying eyes of the outside world. But soon, the cracks began to show. The jungle was not kind. It was hot, oppressive, the air thick with humidity, filled with the constant, droning buzz of insects. The days were long and brutal, the nights dark and full of strange sounds, the rustling of leaves, the distant cries of unseen animals, the whispering of the wind through the trees. The food was scarce, the water unclean. Illness spread like wildfire. People grew weak, tired, afraid, and Jim Jones, he changed. His sermons grew darker, more urgent. He spoke of enemies everywhere, of conspiracies, of people who wanted to destroy their paradise. He warned them of traitors among their own, people who could not be trusted. His voice, once warm and inviting, now held a note of cold command, an undercurrent of menace. The loudspeakers blared his voice day and night, filling the air with his words, his warnings, his demands. "Drink the Kool-Aid," he would say, over and over, his voice echoing through the camp like a chant, like a spell. "Be ready, be vigilant, our enemies are near." And then, the drills began. At first, they thought it was another of his eccentricities, a way to test their loyalty. In the middle of the night, the alarms would sound, and they would gather in the central pavilion, sleepy and confused. They would drink the cups he handed them, the sweet, fruity liquid going down their throats as they stood in the darkness, listening to his voice, waiting for his next command. "You're dead now," he would say, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. "You've just been poisoned. You've just been saved." Some laughed nervously, unsure whether it was a joke, a test, or something more sinister. But Jones never laughed. He watched them, studied them, his smile thin, his gaze piercing. He seemed to know who hesitated, who doubted, who didn't drink fast enough. And those who questioned, they were punished. The atmosphere grew tense. People whispered in the shadows, fear lurking in their eyes. There were rumors of beatings, of people disappearing into the jungle, never to return. The commune felt less like a sanctuary and more like a prison. Yet they stayed, because leaving meant betraying the man they had put their faith in, the man who had promised them salvation. Then one day, an outsider arrived. Congressman Leo Ryan, with a small group of journalists and concerned family members, landed at the airstrip nearby. They had heard rumors, terrible rumors, of people being held against their will, of abuse, of madness. They wanted to see for themselves what Jonestown had become. Jim Jones welcomed them with open arms, his smile wide and false, his eyes cold as steel. The visitors were treated to a show, happy children, smiling workers, songs of joy and unity. For a moment, the reporters were convinced. But then, as night fell, the whispers began. One by one, the defectors came forward, quiet, terrified, begging to be taken away, to be saved. They passed notes, whispered secrets, all under the watchful eye of Jones and his loyal guards. Tensions rose, fear hung thick in the air, and then in the confusion a knife flashed, an attack, a desperate plea for escape. The congressman and his entourage fled to the airstrip, defectors in tow. But the jungle does not let go so easily. The shots rang out, sharp and sudden, cutting through the thick, humid air. Men fell, blood soaking into the earth, screams echoing through the trees. Congressman Ryan was dead. The others, wounded, scattered, running for their lives. Back in Jonestown, Jim Jones knew the end was near. He called his followers to the pavilion, his voice calm but insistent. "It's time," he said. "Time to leave this world. Time to find peace." They gathered, hundreds of them, their faces pale, their eyes wide with fear and uncertainty. The vats were brought out, filled with Kool-Aid, laced with cyanide. Mothers held their children close, tears streaming down their faces. Some begged, some screamed, but the guards were there, with guns, with syringes, pushing, forcing, insisting. "Drink," Jones urged. "Drink, and be free." One by one, they drank. The children first, their small bodies going limp in their mother's arms, their cries fading into silence. Then the adults, their faces contorted with pain, with fear, with resignation. They fell, one after another, bodies piling up on the ground, eyes staring into nothingness. Jim Jones watched, his expression unreadable, his hands trembling slightly. He lifted the cup to his lips, his gaze sweeping over his fallen followers, his flock, his family. "We will meet again," he whispered, and then he drank. And then, silence. The jungle claimed them all, their bodies lying still beneath the swaying palms, the canopy closing in, the vines creeping over their limbs. The birds went quiet. The wind ceased to blow. Only the whispers remained, carried through the trees, a soft, mournful sound, like the voices of the dead, echoing in the darkness. "Come to us, come to us." To this day, Jonestown remains a scar on the earth. A place where the jungle swallowed 1,000 souls, where madness took root and grew wild. Some say, if you listen closely, you can still hear them. The voices of the lost, the whispers of those who drank the poison, who followed their leader into the dark. They say the jungle never forgets, that it holds onto its secrets, its stories, like shadows clinging to the light. And if you ever find yourself there, deep in the heart of Guyana, where the trees grow thick and the air hangs heavy with moisture, be careful. Because the whispers are still there, waiting for someone to listen, waiting for someone to follow. Drink the Kool-Aid. Drink and be free. But beware, for in Jonestown, freedom is just another word for death.